Thank you, Lloyd. Thank you for coming again to the Resistance United Great Britain and family. And as usual, the stage is yours to educate us and inform us about perhaps the greatest evil of all. So go ahead, please.
Yeah. Hey everyone. Thanks for being here. And let me share my screen. So screen two. Share my screen and get back to where I finished. So I am talking about the Islamic Political Lobby, and I've been speaking about the incredible amount of influence and power that they have. I think so far I've shown dozens, if nearly in the hundreds, of citations from public and other sources, government sources, that show just how active they are, how powerful they are, where they've got influence, all the way up to the level of president, part of presidential staff, personal friends with presidents, multiple presidents, and with the CIA. I think we've shown that, and also the sheer amount of money that they are spreading around. And they don't only spend this money on lobbying within Washington, they spread this money altering the US educational system. They put the money into their propaganda in the US educational system, universities, kindergarten, schools, you name it, K through 12 and university. They are pumping in money. They're pumping money into think tanks, into consultancies. They're pumping money into lobbying groups. You name it. It is the Islamic money is everywhere, and we're going to go into further depth again today. So let me go to where I ended off last time. So we were discussing, I believe, how they were heavily embedded into the Bush family. So yeah, I'll just continue from there. And okay, so I'll just recap on the last slide that we had going previously. So if you want to, you'll have to recap with the video that was posted previously. So um, 2 days after 9/11, US air traffic is tightly restricted, but 140 Saudis, who are royals and family of Osama bin Laden, are permitted to leave and thus escape questioning by US intelligence. This man is John O'Neill, former FBI counter-terror expert who died in the World Trade Center. He tells us that all the answers, everything needed to dismantle Osama bin Laden's organization, can be found in Saudi Arabia. Now, we do know that Saudi Arabia was heavily connected to 9/11. Something like 15 of the 19 hijackers were Saudis. And of course, Saudi also funneled money not only through Pakistan's ISI, but also through Iran. There was some level of coordination. Now, that's not to say there wasn't some degree of, there may have been an inside job. This is not my interest in discussing what we cannot prove, but there is very strong involvement with, obviously, Islam here. To continue, now, in the 1970s, the oil-rich House of Saud began courting American politicians in a bid for military protection, for influence, and for investment opportunity. And of course, this has allowed them to now establish themselves heavily into the US and also European political, military, financial, military systems. So with the Bush family, the Saudis hit themselves a major gusher. So let's have a look through the Bush-Saudi business ties. This is not even all that there is to be found, but it's a good introduction. Saudi investment in the Carlyle Group, which is the private equity firm whose rainmakers include George Bush Sr., was a former CIA director. Then you've got Saudi Prince Bandar, nicknamed Bandar Bush, who's ambassador to the United States from 83 to 2005, and the former head of Saudi intelligence who donated $1 million to the G.H.W. Bush Presidential Library. Of course, the Saudis ultimately donated a minimum of $1.67 billion. That is nearly a known $1,700 million to the Bushes. Bandar Bush is an interesting character. He's called Bandar Bush because he's so closely tied to the Bush family. He's like a brother to George Bush. His father was Saudi defense minister. He's close friends with the elder Bush for more than 20 years. And they went hunting and fishing together, and Bandar donated $1 million. And "You're my friend for life," Bandar wrote to Bush Sr. in 92. "I feel like one of your family. You are like one of our own." It should be noted, Bandar Bush is not a Jew. He is Saudi. Now, lucrative Saudi contracts were given to Halliburton when Dick Cheney was CEO. And the main law firm retained by the Saudis to defend them against the 9/11 families who were suing them for their involvement in 9/11 was Baker Botts, as in James Baker, the Bush family advisor and legal counsel. Now, here's a question. Did the Saudis buy a president from Salon.com, leftist? How much money has flowed from the House of Saud to the Bush family and its friends? No one will ever know, but the number is at least $1.477 billion. So, if the Saudis had been happy with the presidency of George H.W. Bush, and they were, they must have been truly ecstatic in the summer of 2000 that his son was the Republican candidate for president. Indeed, the relationship between the two dynasties had come a long way. So now, open acknowledgement of the strong relationship between the Bush family and that of the Saudis. Nelson Mandela is quoted as describing the prince as one of the great peacemakers of our time. An outstanding man, a charming, eloquent, and nonetheless humble figure, larger than life and full of fun. He's a storyteller without equal. What a wonderful, amazing guy. He's the nephew of the former Saudi king Fahd bin Abdulaziz Al Saud. He has landing rights for his private Airbus jet at RAF Bryce Norton Base, the largest station of the Royal Air Force. Let me see, Harry, you're Jewish and therefore you have special privilege in the world. Can you land your Airbus at a RAF military base at any time?
Unfortunately not.
You can't?
I'm excluded from there. No, they don't allow that anymore.
Okay, so you have to leave your jet parked in the garage.
I guess.
Oh, that's a pity. Well, this Saudi guy, he can land his private Airbus jet at RAF Bryce Norton Base, which is the largest Royal Air Force base.
Wow.
Some guys have all the luck. So this is him here. This is him with Tony Blair. It was a terrific fight, but you managed to land this giant, blah, blah, blah. Congratulations, Ambassador, your friend George Bush. Here they are in, better days, going fishing together. Right? Let's continue to have a look. Here they are again together. Much, much later, many decades later. Here the two are together. So the Saudis have no political influence, no friends, no clout, nothing. Him with Putin. Well, there he is again with George H.W. Bush as president. Here he is with Putin again. Okay, so that's Bandar Bush. Now he has personal relationships with the leaders of Russia, China, Syria, Great Britain, and of course others. Prince Bandar bin Sultan, Saudi Arabia's most famous arms dealer, former ambassador to the US, and former head of Saudi intelligence, was detained as part of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's so-called corruption purge. Bandar bought an entire village in the Cotswolds, a picturesque area of central Oxfordshire, England, and a 2,500-acre estate with part of the proceeds from kickbacks he received in the Al Yamama arms deal, which netted British manufacturer BAE $57 billion in contracts for fighter aircraft. As much as $30 million is alleged to have been paid into Bandar's dollar account at Riggs Bank in Washington and led to corruption probes in the US and UK, all of which were promptly dropped and forgotten, or were just dragged out for 20 years and then said, okay, well, hey, taken so long, let's just let it go. Lucky guy. The case was dropped in the UK in 2006 after an intervention by Tony Blair, because obviously Tony Blair took one look and said, this is just a poor camel jockey living in a cave, has no money, no political influence, let's just feel sorry for him. Now, interestingly, last year, survivors of the 9/11 attacks wrote to British Prime Minister Theresa May, urging her to make public a British government report into the extent of Saudi Arabia's funding of Islamist extremism in the UK. And of course, she refused to release the report because, hey, she's close with these people. These are her friends, right? The Home Secretary accused her of putting our so-called friendship with Saudi Arabia above our values, as she cites national security for keeping the investigation secret. Well, I guess she knows which side her bread is buttered on. Now, Labour Friends of Saudi Arabia says critics are Islamophobes. The Labour Party, the communists, the red-green axis, yeah, I guess they're all pro-Saudi. I wonder. You have to wonder. Now, here's a question. I'm not going to dig into this in any depth, but this has been around for a while. I haven't seen any decent debunking of this, but let's just throw it out there. Osama bin Laden, was he a CIA-funded agent? Now, George H.W. Bush served as Director of Central Intelligence from January 76 to January 77. 10 days shy of one full year. In 81, he became President Ronald Reagan's vice president. In a 2004 article entitled Al-Qaeda's Origins and Links, the BBC wrote, during the anti-Soviet war, bin Laden and his fighters received American and Saudi funding. Some analysts believe bin Laden himself had security training from the CIA. This is the document supposedly proving that bin Laden was a CIA asset called Tim Osman. right? So he was a CIA asset called Tim Osman here. Osman equals Osama bin Laden, otherwise known as OBL, right? So it says here, Salam M. bin Laden to hereby vest unto James Reynold Barth, right? So now you see James Barth, again, this friend of George Bush's, connected, right? Certificate of formation of a limited partnership. So he was a money man and fixer for the George Bushes, and he played he was like sort of he was a go-between for Saudi money and others who wanted to invest in the US. So in witness whereof, the certificate has been duly executed on behalf of these parties, and George W. Bush, President, signed it. Very, very interesting. Arbusto, of course, is the company belonging to George Bush, right? And so here you've got James Barth and so on, Salam bin Laden, all signing these fantastic documents. So let's continue. So they have legal relationships. So given the evidence so far, are you sure that now we've covered extensive evidence prior, right? Are you sure the Arabs and Muslims have no political influence, as we are told by commentators? Now, if you go have a look at photographs of the estate, remember this guy bought an entire village, an entire English village, not just the house. He bought the entire village. So these guys have influence within the UK, in Europe, all over, right? And so, but people are insisting that they have no political influence and no money. And so far, we're not done yet, but so far I think we've shown in the previous episode inclusive that these people have immense political power and huge amounts of money. Let's look how close they are with foreign diplomats. Let's have a look.
Lloyd,
Yeah.
do you have any information about Zbigniew Brzezinski? I think he
Zbigniew
was part
Brzezinski.
of.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he was part of the. He led the organization of the Mujahideen and supplying
Yeah, he's
armaments and.
involved. Yeah, this is. I think there's something to do with him and Osama bin Laden, and then taking Osama
Yeah.
to America to do a tour of U.S. Army bases. Things I couldn't really confirm any of that, but I mean, I wouldn't deny it. I mean, I have no evidence to say no, it didn't happen. But I didn't look into that connection. But I mean, he's been a dirty sleazeball, I think, for a long time. Everyone, at least that seems to be the general perception of him. Yep. So here you go. So before the current Saudi king, we had this guy. Okay. And you can see they make a cute couple. Whoever this guy is, not sure who this guy is, but this guy's from Saudi. Real cute couple. Oh boy. Maybe they need to book a room. What do you think? And here is our other good friend again here. Bandar Bush with Condoleezza Rice. So what do you think these two need to get a room? Harry?
They should. They should.
Yeah, it's starting to look a little steamy there, right? Yeah, they make a great couple. Make a great couple. Isn't affection just an amazing thing? Happy couple. A happy couple again. Yeah, just. I'm happy for them. They found, love is oh boy, love is a wonderful thing. Especially at that age. Right. Yeah. Sorry, Harry.
No, go ahead.
Right. And oh, sorry, I don't know how that slipped in there. Yeah, I can see this guy doesn't have the same masculine appeal that this dude has, so I can see why his dad obviously never taught him how to throw a ball, yeah, poor sad little guy. I don't know who this is. He just seemed to find his way in there. Right. Now, let's have a look. At least 1.476 billion had made its way from the Saudis to the House of Bush. Never before in history had a presidential candidate, much less a presidential candidate and his father, a former president, been so closely tied financially and personally to the ruling family of another foreign power. Never before had a president's personal fortunes and public policies been so deeply entwined with another nation. Now, yeah, I don't. Do you recall who was the previous president of Israel? What was the name of that guy? The former president of Israel?
Netanyahu?
Oh, Netanyahu. Do you have any pictures of Netanyahu smooching with the U.S. president? Does anybody have any of those
No.
photos? Because I see them smooching with the Saudis here. Quite literally, holding hands and smooching. I don't see that close relationship with. But anyway, moving on. So let's look at foreign interest spending. Is Israel number one? So foreign interest now going back to 2017, and most of the data is between like 2014 and 2018, 2011 and 2017, 2011, 2012, and 2018. So much of the numbers I'm presenting here are roughly 2011, 2012, up to 2018. Okay, I've got some newer figures here and there which are up to last year, but just keep that in mind. We're not talking about 1,000-year period. We're talking about, like, in some cases as little as 3 or 4 years. Foreign interests have spent over 530 million influencing US policy and public opinion since 2017. Take that number with a grain of salt. There are ways and means around that. We know for a fact that a lot of it is not reported, and they've got ways and tricks. If they keep it under a certain amount, that doesn't have to be reported. And also, the bulk of this money is not going to politicians. The bulk of this money is going to think tanks. It is going to influencers. It is going to universities to corrupt the minds of American university students. The number one spender since 2017, right, and this is up to 2019, this number, if I recall, is, anyone who wants to guess who is the biggest political spender in the US? Or who was at that point? Anybody wants to guess? Okay, I think everybody knows it's, sorry?
Yeah.
Sorry?
Saudi. No,
it's
the
Israel.
guys are
Everyone knows
muted.
it's Israel. Sorry, it's Israel, Korea. Sorry, Israel, Korea. No, South Korea. Oh my God. Number one political spender. Okay, fine. South Korea. I guess Israel's number two. Number two, with 51.4 million since 2017, is Israel. There you go. Israel. No, sorry, Japan. Okay, so I guess Israel is doing something wrong here. The overblown claims against Israeli Jewish lobbying are just that. Once you start to look at the numbers, as we go through the numbers, those claims are just exaggerations with very little basis in fact. And in fact, it's just propaganda. It's just people repeating Saudi propaganda. About $3 out of every $10 spent on foreign lobbying in the US originates from Asian countries, specifically South Korea, Japan, China, Hong Kong, and Taiwan. These 5 countries have spent a combined $158.2 million since January 2017. Of course, this is where the obligatory I don't know what, anti-Jewish person comes in and says, well, you see, it's the invisible money. They have invisible money. They're using invisible money that you can't see. Oh, send me a sample. I'd love to have a look. Send us some evidence. All right. So this is nearly half of the 375 million spent by the remaining 128 countries. So 5 countries spend nearly 50% of the entire lobbying spend. The South Korean government has spent 54 million since 2018 on US lobbying, ranking first amongst foreign principals. The top 10 countries by spending since 2017 are the following: South Korea, Japan, number 2, the United Arab Emirates, number 3, then comes Israel in this example. That's for 2017 to 2018. Ireland, very, very close to Israel. China. Now, then you have the Cayman Islands, Saudi Arabia, then Canada, then Germany. Understand that they all work through the OIC. They act as one unit in many, many things. They are allied politically on a number of issues. So you can combine this spend with this spend. Right? Cayman Islands is about the size of my bathroom. Right? It's got 3 people living on it, 2 of whom are goats. Right? And so the question is, how does the Cayman Island have this much money to throw into lobbying? Well, the answer is well known, is that they are a front for foreign money. Russia, China, and probably Saudi Arabia, who utilize the Cayman Islands and various other small principalities to push their lobbying, but it seems to come as independent money. Right, let's have a look. Top 10 foreign principals by spending, 2017-2018. Government of South Korea. Japan External Trade Organization. Tourism Island. I think Israel's doing something wrong when Tourism Island outspends it in lobbying for favors in the US. Then you have the government of the Cayman Islands. Again, the Cayman Island is the size of my bathroom, has 5 people on it, 2 of whom are pets, dogs, and 1 of which is a goat for lunch, and then there's 2 people. Okay? So understand, so how much of this is Saudi money? How much of this is Chinese money? Then you have the government of the Marshall Islands, which is like 2 bathrooms. Then you have China Daily of Beijing. Okay, that's a newspaper. The government of Qatar, Deutsche Telekom, and then you have government of Abu Dhabi and government of Saudi Arabia. Add this, and possibly to this. Right? And now you're starting to look at some real money. They're starting to rival number 1, if not exceed it. Let's continue. The top lobby groups. Number 2 is the Podesta Group. 7 of the top 20 registrants are trade or tourism related organizations. So it looks like trade and tourism are big lobbying activities for foreign governments and principals. Since 2017, 69 US firms earned $73 million through foreign contacts. Nearly a quarter at this time went to Aiken, Gumstrauss, Hauer and Feld, $17 million, of which the biggest spender was the United Arab Emirates in 2018 with $5.5 million. The Podesta Group was second, and Sonoran Policy Group third. They each earned over $7 million. So absent from 2018 foreign lobbying spending was the Podesta Group's sole 2018 filing, which was their termination of work for foreign clients because they were found to be, well, doing things that weren't exactly illegal, and they shut it down before they were arrested. So, you see, the Podesta Group formally wound down its operation on the 31st of December 2017. Things were getting a little hot for them. The firm dissolved following scrutiny over foreign lobbying activities. As I started when I did this, the first episode of this, of course, there's a little financial laundering and other things that were going on. So, yeah. So, Podesta Group, obviously very closely tied because his brother was running Hillary Clinton's campaign. So, they're very, very closely tied with the Hillary campaign, with Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, and of course, they are the number one group that are connected with Saudi. So Saudi Arabia's influence network in Washington, from Podesta to Riyadh. So this is what Saudi Arabia's influence network in Washington looks like. This is from the Washington Post. Podesta Group is linked directly to the Saudi Royal Court, and from there they are linked to a number of other internal US government and other influences. Let's continue. Democrat Party lobbyist Tony Podesta was a registered foreign agent on the Saudi government payroll. In other words, he was a Saudi agent. Saudi Arabia continues hiring spree of American lobbyists, public relations experts. So Saudi is very, very actively busy influencing US public opinion. His brother John Podesta chaired Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign. And the question here is, who is Tony Podesta? The Russia probe investigating brother of Hillary Clinton campaign chair. So these guys look like foreign fixers. Now, Tony personally managed the Saudi lobbying account. Podesta Group, funded by Tony and John Podesta in '88, received $140K a month. That might be each, I don't know, from the Saudi government. John Podesta served as President Bill Clinton's chief of staff. Now, he's taken a bunch of money while connected personally to Bill Clinton. Meet Chief of Staff John Podesta, and this is him with Bill Clinton. So it looks like he probably knows the president. Founded influential DC think tank Center for American Progress, which touts Saudi reforms, in other words, Saudi propaganda. He was a counselor to President Obama. So as you can see, these goat herders from Saudi Arabia who live in caves have no political influence and no connections to presidents whatsoever, except they've been tied to every single US president for the last couple of decades. So here we go.
They also have nothing to do with pizza. They don't have anything to do with pizza.
Pizza.
You know about the Pizzagate.
Pizzagate. Probably nothing there either. I mean, just nothing to see here. Move along.
Yeah.
You know?
No pizza for you. Yeah.
Exactly.
Go
exactly. Ahead. So, counselor to President Barack Obama. So this guy who's closely tied to the Saudis, taken a bunch of money from them. The major fixer for the Saudi court is assistant to President Clinton and President Obama and connected to Hillary. So, Tony Podesta was dubbed by New York Times as one of Washington's biggest players, whose clients are going to get a blueprint for how to succeed in Washington. Okay, so clearly these guys are just nobodies. The Clinton Foundation has accepted tens of millions of dollars from countries that the State Department, before, during, and after Mrs. Clinton's time as secretary, criticized for their records on sex discrimination and other human rights abuses. This includes Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Kuwait, Oman, Brunei, and Algeria. All happen to be Islamic countries, just so coincidentally. Saudi Arabia has been a generous benefactor. The kingdom gave up to $25 million to the Clinton Foundation, and $1 million more was donated by the Friends of Saudi, which was co-founded with Prince Abdulaziz bin Abdullah bin Abdulaziz Al Saud. Okay, fantastic. Saudi Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, third son of the former king, so clearly no connections to the Clintons. Saudi Arabia has funded 20% of Hillary Clinton's 2016 presidential campaign, Saudi Crown Prince claims. They seemed very interested in having her become the new president. I wonder if they'd, paid for favors. I wonder if they were expecting to get their money back and more. So, I guess, Hillary Clinton, Saudi Arabia, and ISIS. So WikiLeaks has been a reliable source of information. Julian Assange says ISIS and Clinton Foundation are both funded by Saudi Arabia and Qatar. So she was happy to take dirty money from people that were playing both sides and trying to undermine the US. So we'll get into that as we go. So Mr. Pilger here, John Pilger, the journalist, asked if Mr. Assange believed that this notorious jihadist group called ISIL or ISIS is created largely with money from people who are giving money to the Clinton Foundation. And Mr. Assange said yes. Now, of course, the Jew-hating amongst us will obviously let us know that the Catholic Church funded this or something like that, or Jesus Christ himself opened a bank account at Chase Manhattan and sent a check. But I'm happy to trust Julian Assange in this case, who says that it came from the Qataris. Right? So, yeah, so let's see. There are people who trust Julian Assange, and at the same time, they want to make up stupid conspiracy theories. Pick one. Right, now, this entire effort, blah, blah, blah. So, while this paramilitary operation is moving forward, we need to use our diplomatic and more traditional intelligence assets to bring pressure on the governments of Qatar and Saudi Arabia, which are providing clandestine financial and logistic support to ISIS and other radical Sunni groups in the region. Right, I wonder who said those words so that she knows about this, but, well, so Hillary Clinton emails reveal she knew of Saudi and Qatar government funding for ISIS by August 2014. We get this from WikiLeaks. The Qataris and the Saudis will be put in a position of balancing policy between the ongoing competition to dominate the Sunni world and the consequences of serious US pressure. But, of course, they are both trying to undermine, and quite successfully, the US itself as they do this. Let's have a look here. So let's talk a little bit about Qatar. Blood money. How Qatar bought off the entire DC establishment. Right. Okay, so it seems Qatar is now competing heavily with Saudi Arabia to buy off Washington. So, Khashoggi, that's the Jamal Khashoggi who was killed by the Saudis. He was an agent for the Qataris, of course. He was not a good guy. He penned opinion columns in the Washington Post favorable to the Muslim Brotherhood, the world's largest criminal organization, possibly. Right, definitely a secret society, an Islamic secret society, as well as the founder of something like 200 offshoot Islamic terror groups. He visited the Saudi consulate in Istanbul, was never seen again. He was a Qatari asset. This was a game of spy versus spy, and he lost. WikiLeaks revealed a 2009 cable by Hillary Clinton saying more needs to be done since Saudi Arabia remains a critical financial support base for Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, Lashkar-e-Taiba, and other terrorist groups. Okay, so this wasn't the Catholic Church funding them, but the Saudis were funding Islamic terror. Very, very interesting. It just seems too convenient that Muslims are funding Muslims. Can't believe it. Instead of sanctioning the Saudis, the Clintons did the opposite. She authorized enormous quantities of weapons to be sold to the Saudis. On Christmas Eve in 2011, Hillary Clinton and her closest aides celebrated a massive $30 billion sale to the Saudis of over 80 F-15 fighter jets manufactured by Boeing. Boeing contributed nearly $1 million to the Clinton Foundation. So, now we've got Glenn Greenwald, very respectable journalist, leftist, but an honest man who does great work. He says, why did the Saudi regime and other Gulf tyrannies donate millions to the Clinton Foundation? That's a very, very good question. What did they get for their money? The Department of Justice fails to pursue allegations of Saudi lobbying misconduct. US military vets say that Corvus Communications, funded by Saudi, tricked them into unknowingly lobbying on behalf of Saudi Arabia. And a campaign against a law enabling 9/11 victims to sue the kingdom used unregistered agents and failed to provide required disclosures. They were running damage control against the fact that Saudi Arabia was heavily involved in 9/11, and they wanted to keep this out of the papers, and the Saudis worked overtime to make sure that, as you know, you can only blame white people and Jews, and they made sure that that was the case. Right? So the Saudis investigated themselves, found themselves guilty, and decided to run a PR campaign to make sure that their propaganda stuck. So, exclusive, FBI told former agent not to help the 9/11 victims build a case against Saudi Arabia. So the FBI, which needs a cleanup, in fact, the FBI should be investigated by the FBI, but the FBI has investigated themselves and found themselves innocent, just like the CIA, I guess. So, author of 9/11's famed Phoenix Memo was told the White House's pursuit of warm relations with the Saudi kingdom comes first. 9/11 victims come last. Former Senate Intelligence Chair Bob Graham calls the FBI's action a fundamental assault on the principle of democracy, because the FBI's priority is protecting US-Saudi relationship. Any comment from you, Harry?
No, it's just very interesting. Please continue.
Yeah, so the Saudis, as you can see, have no political influence. They have no media influence. They spend nothing on propaganda because they're sheep that are white as snow. So, Qatar. Mike Cernovich, all these never Trump people are on Qatar's payroll. Fascinating. Mike Cernovich is an excellent journalist as well, right? And yeah, so he says that all those people that are never Trump are on Qatar's payroll. Why? You got to ask yourself why. So he says they all are beneficiaries of state funding from Qatar. And this is all part of an information campaign, including Al Jazeera and AJ Plus, directed at shaping American public opinion. Of course, all those people who hate Donald Trump will say, well, my opinion's not shaped by Qatari money. I have the facts. Yeah, okay, sure, whatever. The Brookings Institute and all these never Trump people on the Qatari payroll, Al Jazeera and AJ Plus propagandize Americans every day. Most people, when they're showing memes from AJ Plus, don't realize that this is propaganda and that it is from a terrorist nation. In 2016, the United Arab Emirates held a slot in the top tier of donors, also having funded the left-wing organization, the Brookings Institute, with $2 million or more for the year. I wonder what they got for their money. Qatar is amongst its largest benefactors. Qatar has been paying top dollar to influence American politics and media in ways that would make Rachel Maddow apoplectic if Qatar was spelled Russia. But of course, no, that would be Islamophobic. We can't blame these innocent goat herders for being guilty of whatever they're guilty of. So yeah, so she worries about like $80 spent on Facebook by Russia, but the hundreds of millions spent by the billions spent by the Qataris, well, hey, that's that's all good. So yeah, in 2013, the Israeli government spent 1,250 million. No, sorry. In 2013, the Israeli government spent only $1,250 on US political lobbying. That's all that was recorded. $1,250 total. The UAE spent $14.2 million on US political lobbying. This is 11,360 times more than Israel. As you can see, Israel spends more money because $1,250 is a lot more than 14.2 million. It's very interesting that all of the, especially like this Moonglow 100 or whatever his name was, mob psychology or whatever his name was, doesn't have any figures to back up his statements, but he's happy to make the statements while either he's been lied to and he's now spreading lies, or he's ignorant and he just likes it. So the top 10
Lloyd,
foreign...
we have
yeah, sure.
We have a question. Can we take
sure,
a question?
Sure, yeah.
Paul, please go ahead. Paul? Yeah.
I can hear you.
Yeah, you raised your hand. Do you have a question?
Yeah. Just a thought on the Israel lobbying thing. Isn't the Israeli government massively funded by the Americans anyway? So
see, that's another propaganda talking point, because are they not? Do you have facts? Do you have figures? Or are these questions just designed to undermine the facts? It's like, I know you've got facts, Lloyd, but I have these questions that are designed to undermine any good evidence. Well, on that point, the typical argument that is presented against Israel is that Israel has an incredible stranglehold on the US, an incredible stranglehold. That's literally the word that is used in the propaganda. They have a stranglehold on the US. It's like, tell me, Paul, does your mother have a stranglehold, an evil stranglehold on your affection? Does your girlfriend have an evil stranglehold on your affection?
I'm not sure. I'm just googling it now to see what.
So what happens is you see, your mom has an evil stranglehold because you like your mom. You see, Americans like Israel. They dislike Islam. They dislike the Middle East. So the bulk of the money that they talk about is not funded by Israel. Most of the money is funded by AIPAC, because the argument always centers around AIPAC. AIPAC is not a foreign organization. It is an internal, publicly funded American organization funded by people, civilians who live in America, who like Israel. And I covered this in the last episode. They fund Israel through donations because they like Israel for many reasons culturally. They realize the threat that Israel is under from the Islamic states around it, because Israel is still technically at war. It only has a peace treaty with 2 of its neighbors. And of course, the other 20 neighbors are all technically at war with Israel, and the other 2 might crumble if they get pressured into actually going to war again. And so people donate money willingly They willingly donate their funds to Israel, and they pressure for various things. Whereas these are Saudis that are raising, along with 51 countries, billions of dollars to do their propaganda. So, yeah.
Lloyd, but actually, maybe you should speak about the money that the government in Israel is receiving from the military complex as a form of subsidy. How do you call it?
Subsidy?
They are subsidizing their own military complex by selling weapons to Israel by federal money.
So, I mean, the
It's
US
like a
donates,
revolving door.
there's a name for that, but the US donates money to countries, right? With the agreement that that country spends the money on US products and services. So that money goes
Yeah.
directly back to the US, which obviously then sets up contracts because you buy military equipment, but with it, you've got to buy a 5 or 10-year service contract. So this ensures, it ensures that products are developed, it ensures that products are exported, it ensures that products are obviously stockpiled, that the shelf life of a product is extended because now you've got customers that have it and they can't always afford to upgrade very quickly. So now you've got an extended shelf life, or at least usage for the product, the term of the product lengthens. And then, of course, you've got regular income of contracts for maintenance. Plus, you've got people and staff that are having to service those contracts, service those products, right? So now you've got actually an entire industry built around that. Now, everyone complains. Now, as I said, as I covered in the very first episode, which Paul missed, Israel is technically at war with all of its neighbors still, okay, except for two. And Israel will be wiped out by these Muslims if given the chance. And then, of course, the same was happening to Pakistan, which was heavily involved in terrorist activities against the US. And it gives money to various other countries, all of which seek to undermine the US. But no one complains about that. So Pakistan is not the US's friend in any shape, way, or form, but no one complains about the money they get. So most of the money is from APAC. Now, if you consider the amount of money that Israel gets, for instance, let's say Israel gets 1.5 or $3 billion for the year. Saudi Arabia is the biggest military spender, as I covered last time as well in detail. Saudi Arabia would spend something like 13 to 14 billion dollars in a year.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit more money. And of course, then on top of that, you've got Qatar, you've got Pakistan, you've got UAE. And remember, there's 51 of these Arab countries that are all getting money, that are all hostile to Israel.
Yeah, Lloyd, a member from Iraq is asking for the image that you are presenting right now on the screen. Can you share it in the main group, please?
I'd have to copy and paste this from, let's see. I'd have to stop to show this, I'd have to stop the presentation and copy the image, then drop it in here. So these are top 10 foreign governments paying for US influence. Okay, this is year 2013, right? This is a 2013 number. So you can see here Saudi Arabia, sorry, as well as Canada. Then you've got Mexico, Morocco, Germany, Georgia, South Korea. So these are major countries. Okay, these are major countries looking, and of course the UAE down here. Okay, so these are countries that are very, very influential. But there's a link here, so let me see. Now, this is from the Washington Post, so actually, let me just click the link. Okay, later on, I can share this with you. All right. Right, now let's look at Hillary Clinton playing both sides. Just remind me, I'll drop the link in the chat because it's in the spreadsheet. It's in the presentation there. Reuters reported $1 million payment in 2011 through the Clinton Foundation made by Qatar, along with Saudi, were the main sources of funding to the jihadis who are trying to overthrow and replace Assad. These royals want to pipeline their oil and gas into Europe and displace the other oil and gas giant, Russia, in the world's largest energy market, the EU. A Moscow-based tech initiative funded in part by the Russian government funneled tens of millions of dollars into the Clinton Foundation while Hillary was serving as Secretary of State. And of course, she was taking money from Saudi, taking money from Qatar, and taking money from the Russians. From Russia with money, how the Clinton cartel and Silicon Valley got filthy rich upgrading the Russian military. So here we got Hillary Clinton, John Podesta, and the Clinton Foundation reaped untold millions selling their favors to Russia while Hillary was Secretary of State. Right, so more money going on there. So donations to the Clinton Foundation and a Russian uranium takeover. So here she played in the Russians' favor. Right, so what was that query? So, uranium investors to buy mining assets in Kazakhstan, and the United States led to a takeover bid by a Russian state-owned energy company. right? The investors gave millions to the Clinton Foundation over the same period, right? And Frank Juster, that's an interesting story as well. When you go and read up, there's a documentary about Frank Juster, and he donated $31 million to the Clinton Foundation, right? I'll go back there. He donates $30+ million, and that's the Uranium One scandal. And of course, if you look at WikiLeaks, Mexican drug kingpin Al Chapo donated $15 million to the Clinton Foundation. So she was happy to accept dirty money. Who knows what she got for that $15 million. Now, Saudi influence and Hillary Clinton. So, suspected bribe by Saudi Arabia and Qatar paid to Bill Clinton while Hillary was Secretary of State. Okay, so now they're not only enemies, but now they're working together. It looks like they have certain common goals, and they work together while they also compete. So this unreported payment intended to go through the Clinton Foundation was made by Qatar along with Saudi. And they are the main sources of funding to the jihadis trying to overthrow and replace Assad. Very, very interesting, and also to do with a gas pipeline. Email scandal. Clinton Foundation's tied to finances of terrorism. Saudi Arabia has paid more than 20% of the cost of Hillary Clinton's blah, blah, blah. So that's Hillary, very close with the Qataris and the Saudis. Arms sales okayed by Hillary Clinton's State Department raise questions. 17 of 20 foreign governments that made donations to the Clinton Foundation saw increases in commercial arms sales to their countries. That's very interesting. So now you've got voluntary aid to Israel, and you've got bribes to the US government for the other countries. So I guess the countries that are bribing the government, I guess that's just legit normal practice, right? So now, for example, arms exports to Saudi Arabia totaling $8 billion were approved, up from $4.1 billion in 2006 to 2008. So they more than doubled their spend, including $30 billion worth of advanced fighter jets. Right, so that's a lot of money. That's nearly $40 billion there. So let's continue. Epstein, oh my golly, $56 million Upper East Side mansion where Epstein abused girls, and of course, it features Bill Clinton and the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. Small world.
1 second, Lloyd.
Yep.
We have here a lady. Her name is Ida.
Yep.
I'm not sure. I invited her back. I'm not sure if she's still on. Yeah,
okay.
She's still on. Ida, I unmuted you. You said in a message to one of the moderators that Lloyd is a plant and dangerous, uses well-established facts to add credibility, but the aim is to continue a Hegelian dialectic, war on terror, and we know who was behind it, the globalist shill. Would you like to say more so we can hear your incredible arguments against Lloyd? Where is she?
Not really. I think what he has to say is pretty evident. So if anyone is smart enough to actually read what he's saying, it's pretty evident that this is all a lot of crap, because we know all these facts. This has been well established what he's talking about. So she's actually just gaslighting us with lots of facts, but actually it's not important.
Forget about what he's saying. Please explain to us, he is a shield for who? And please provide your evidence for that.
I think it's evident who he is shilling.
No, it's not evident. Please provide the evidence.
Yes, it is. Well, you tell me. You tell me who.
No, you're the one making the assertion, so please back up your assertions.
No, you tell me who are you shilling for, because your material is clearly outlining what you are. Who are you shilling for?
My material is public information, readily available.
Yes, it is public information.
Ida, are you going to provide? Are you going to present your case in a proper way, or are you going to repeat the question back to us? This is your claim. You are making the assertion that he is a shield. So obviously you have a lot of information about the topic, and I'm sure you're trying to.
I made a statement, and could you please share it with the group? That's all. That's all. And let the other members work out for themselves. I don't.
No, you said nothing. You said nothing. It's just ridiculous.
Well, I think
it's a waste of time talking to you.
I said a lot. You interpret the rest of you, not you and
No,
the
you didn't say
presenter.
anything. You
Or
just
the
said
other
that he's a
members.
shill.
For the
You
other
just
members, he is shill and he knows who's shilling for. We don't need war on terror and we don't need to be slugging Muslims
okay.
anymore.
Goodbye.
We need to unite. We need.
So
Yeah,
Islam
well,
unites with nobody. Islam is not your friend. We've covered Islam in depth. If she wants to start quoting the Sharia to me, the legal definitions of jihad, and talk about what's in the Sharia within the Islamic law that they want to impose, like prepubescent child sex and all of these fun things that the Muslims want to impose upon
no,
us.
but
Well,
you see, Lloyd, it's so interesting that she would make
mm,
the effort to go to one of our amazing moderators,
hmm
and she will make a claim, and she will call you by name, and then when I actually give her the platform to produce the evidence to make her case, she doesn't say anything. She just continued to say, "We all know that you're a shill," and all the rest of it. So I'm not aware of many platforms that allow people like her to actually speak, and she doesn't take the opportunity. And that's because she has absolutely nothing to say other
she
than just
can only
personal
make
attack.
assertions. Remember, I covered in depth the Islamic doctrine of lying. I went into detail on that one. I mean, I nailed that one. I provided the Islamic law, which makes it legal and compulsory, obligatory for Muslims to lie. Right? I detailed exactly how Islam makes lying not only obligatory for Muslims, but explains when to lie, how to lie, who to lie to. And of course, we discussed their method of debate, which is called adab al-jadal, which is a method of utilizing rhetoric to persuade, but it is deceptive rhetoric. It's designed to deceive. It is designed to sway, which is a form of propaganda, and in fact, it falls under hiyal, which is a military tactic. So it's, in other words, it's military propaganda. It's ideological warfare for them, right? So Islam teaches lying. It makes lying obligatory, and of course, this is what she's doing because, from a Western perspective, it is called heuristic, which is designed to undermine someone that they perceive as an enemy, and of course, to undermine the arguments. It's not Islamic debate. Islamic heuristic is not designed to find truth. It is designed to persuade and to undermine arguments. It is designed to win. And also, two of the major tenets of the Sharia are that, of course, that necessities permit the forbidden. So in other words, that if they feel there is a need, they can break any and every single law of Islam. And of course, that the end justifies the means. So she's just following Islamic law, which permits her to lie. And so she will lie. I'll move on from that. I mean, that was a waste of time. She just made assertions, provided no evidence. Right. So, now, notice here, okay? Qatar and Saudi Arabia are providing money to terrorist groups. So Middle East allies, Americans' Middle East allies are funding terror foes. And they gave, here we go, Qatar has given another $6 million to the Clinton Foundation, and Saudi Arabia has donated upwards of $25 million to the foundation. So Hillary is getting a lot of money from these guys. And of course, this may have had a major impact on US policy when Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State. So let's have a look at a couple of emails that Wikipedia found regarding Hillary Clinton. Now remember, this is all public evidence. None of this is secret. All of this anyone can find. So it's not like I'm shilling. These are the facts. So, yeah. So, okay, with Saudi Arabia, we may have different standards. With Saudi Arabia, we may have different standards. So you mean some standards for thee and some standards for others? Interesting. So let's have a look. We, the Department of State and the United States government, may have different standards we apply when it is pushing Saudi. So they have different standards for Saudi Arabia. Well, when Saudi's giving you 20, 30, 40, 50 million dollars, maybe you have different standards for them. Right? So in other words, the US government saying, look, if you don't like our standards, we have others since you've paid us so much money. Right? So these are the standards. Now, this is from hrod17 at clintonemail.com. And of course, Hrod says, no doubt about that. She's replying to D. Mills at state.gov. This was from the Clinton email server. So yes, so the Saudi money has bought them certain amounts of influence. So let's have a look here. FARA funding, Foreign Agents Registration Act, top 10 countries, 1917 to 1919. Now there are different categories. Okay, so in this case, in that period, here you've got Israel who spent $99 million, South Korea 98.6, Japan, 83. Liberia, of all places, spent 72 million. Saudi Arabia spent 57. But the Marshall Islands, again the size of my toilet, spent $53.7 million. Now that's very interesting. How much of this was Saudi money? One should ask. Ireland, obviously on fixing their Morris dancing or whatever, they spent another 52 million for tourism, no doubt. And the UAE spent 43 million. Now if you add these two numbers together, that's already over $101 million, right? China spent 40 million. Now, you must understand that this is there's certain limits they will spend on political lobbying. However, the bulk of their money goes into the US education system, into entertainment and media. Lobbying is a small part of what they do. And then you get Bermuda, another toilet-sized nation, $39 million for political lobbying. Let's have a look here. Top 10 foreign principals. I don't know how they break up this funding, but government of Saudi Arabia, $72.3 million, right? 72.9, sorry, $73 million. Liberia, 72. Government of Bermuda is number one. What is Bermuda doing being number one up here? Where does Bermuda get all this money? That's another tiny island nation. So understand, people are putting money into Bermuda, and then Bermuda's acting on their behalf, and that money is now invisible. Israel is down here at 66 million after South Korea and Japan, just ahead of the Marshall Islands again, with Ireland, some other place I've never heard of, and the Bahamas at $30 million. Now, let's have a look. Okay, you've got Israel that spent in 2018. This is from the Farah Funding webpage. I think you can go, here's a link to that. So let's see, the link is www.opensecrets.org/FARA. So that's www.opensecrets.org/FARA. Foxtrot Alpha Romeo Alpha. Right? So that's the link you can go to, opensecrets.org/Foxtrot Alpha Romeo Alpha. Israel, $23.5 million. Total non-government spending in 2018, $13.7 million. Let's have a look. Saudi Arabia, $34 million. Okay, fascinating. $34 million. Let's have a look. Are there discrepancies though? Are these numbers trustworthy? Are they accurate? So let's have a look at a discussion between someone who researches this. Who's got something to say to me now? Bilateral aid to Israel. Okay, so now bring me the bilateral aid to Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, Kazakhstan, all of these other great places, Afghanistan, you know, the trillions that were spent, you know, the war that Israel fought, the war that America fought on behalf of Saudi Arabia when they were invaded by Iraq, right? At least, well, they fought a war to free Bahrain. Was it Bahrain that they invaded? Because they were worried that they would be invaded next. So, yeah. So let's see. Kelly, let me start with the lobbying firms. You've been able to track how much Saudi Arabia spends on lobbying by studying documents filed in something called the FARA Act. Yes, we know Saudi Arabia has spent $19 million on influence campaigns in the US since the beginning of 2017 and $9 million this year alone. So the FARA Act is not well enforced. They rely on a policy of voluntary compliance. There is no enforcement. They haven't clarified what activities and relationships are covered by the law, so the law is completely unclear. Think tanks have not been required to register. There's a rule in the White House that when non-governmental witnesses, particularly think tank experts, are asked to testify, they have to file what are known as truth in testimony forms. They have to disclose foreign funding within the last 2 years as relates to the subject of the hearing. But these experts from think tanks who specialize in Middle Eastern policy and receive millions of dollars from Saudi, Qatar, and the UAE, which do have an interest, go undisclosed because the rules are lax and they're not enforced. So this is a long-standing practice. She says yes. So while in theory they have laws, these laws are not enforced. And the Islamic countries are given a wide open playing field to run their influence. So let's look at this article, the Saudi lobby juggernaut. A lobby to contend with. So the roots of the lobbies rise to prominence in Washington lie in the aftermath of September 11. 15 of the 19 hijackers were Saudi Arabian. Around $100 million was spent over the next decade to improve public perception and retain Saudi influence in the US capital. The lobbying phase that proved a success until 2015. Relationships soured with the Obama administration over the Iran nuclear deal, and then once Donald Trump won the presidency, the Saudis saw an opportunity and launched the equivalent of a full court press. Now understand that Donald Trump gave them a hard time. They tripled their spend. You will see in one of the reports that will come up that they are forced to spend more money when they meet with an unfavorable president. So they have no choice but to boost their lobbying to try and regain whatever the position they've lost. In 2017, the number had tripled to nearly $30 million. And that's just a baseline figure for a far larger operation to buy influence in Washington, since it doesn't include considerable sums given to elite universities or think tanks like the Arab Gulf States Institute, the Middle East Institute, and the Center for Strategic and International Studies, just to name a few. These are very much in line with the Confucius Institutes, which are fronts for Chinese indoctrination, Chinese propaganda, and of course Chinese Communist Party. So these are just fronts operating on behalf of the Saudis. Right. So I'll continue. The Saudi agents next door, Americans who cashed in on the campaign to stop the 9/11 trial. So again, Saudi Arabia spent millions trying to keep 9/11 families and survivors from presenting evidence against the kingdom. Do you think that this is evidence that the Saudis are innocent, Harry?
They are innocent because they have money to spend. So money talks.
Yeah, so I'm just thinking, so what was the point of all this here? From 950, that's, okay, bilateral. I have no idea what the point of that was. So last October, the Saudi government partnered with Corvus to launch a massive nationwide lobbying effort aimed at undermining a new law that cleared the way for 9/11 families and survivors to sue Saudi Arabia for its support of Al-Qaeda and its hijackers. The kingdom's campaigned to keep evidence of its links to 9/11 out of court. So they hired lobbyists and groups to make sure that they were kept out of the limelight, and they cheated Americans out of their right to a fair trial. But of course, that's, the Saudis are innocent. Let's have a look here. The Gulf Network is seriously compromising its journalism in the Gulf states by blurring the line between advertising and editorial. Why didn't CNN air its own Ivory Revolution documentary? So this is a discussion of how these guys influence policy at CNN, right? So they're able to get away. Well, let's see what Paul wants. Let's have another look at what Paul wants. So the top 10 countries that received the most foreign aid, 4.89 billion, Afghanistan. Trillions went into Afghanistan. Trillions went into that war. Israel, 3.3 billion. Jordan, 1.72. Okay, so Israel is one country. And of course, now if you start adding up all of those Islamic countries together, because they operate together through the OIC, now, you know, what would that total up to? So bring me back the total, because if you'd seen the first episode, you'll see it's like well over $20 billion. And then Israel has like 1/8 of that. But, you know, keep going. Right. So now it's like having a gang that each gets $3 billion, and then you stand alone with $1 billion, and everyone goes, look, he got $1 billion. Okay. So Penske Media is silent on $200 million Saudi investment after Jamal Khashoggi's disappearance. So they ran a massive campaign to influence the media to clean up their image. Okay. So they invested tons of money quietly into various media companies. Billionaire Saudi prince, Fox News co-owner. Did you know that this guy was a co-owner of Fox News? This guy here.
No, I didn't know.
Yeah, the Saudis were
He
co-owners.
must be a conservative, right?
He must be a Jew, obviously. You can see here he's wearing the Jewish, I don't know,
Yeah,
whatever.
it's a yarmulke.
Exactly, yarmulke. You're right. I don't know how I didn't see that. So Saudi Arabia's Prince Al-Walid bin Talal, a member of the country's royal family and investing in Fox and Apple and other media companies, was arrested on Saturday in connection with corruption. Okay, and he regularly appears on CNBC offering investment advice. Okay, so I guess they have no media standing whatsoever. Bin Talal has also invested in US corporate entities, Citigroup, 21st Century Fox, and Twitter, amongst others. Okay, fascinating. And this Saudi prince now owns more of Twitter than Jack Dorsey does. And this was October 7th, 2015, according to this report.
But 1 second, I forgot the name of the other guy in the picture. But I think, just for the record, the other guy is a Jew, right?
Rupert Murdoch. Yeah.
It's yeah, he is a Jew, correct?
I'm not sure. I have no idea. No.
I think he is.
Yeah, he may or may not be. So, yeah. Arrest of billionaire Saudi prince shines light in U.S. holdings, Citigroup, Twitter, Apple. Okay, so now this guy owns, now let's see the Tech and Silicon Valley Vision Fund Investments. SoftBank's $93 billion Vision Fund is largely funded by Saudi Arabia. So it has pumped billions into multiple tech startups around the world. Last year, it invested $4.4 billion in WeWork. a $2.25 billion investment in GM's driverless cars, Slack, DoorDash, and Improbables, among other companies that receive Vision Fund cash. The fund also holds a 25% stake in ARM Holdings, and which is a semiconductor and software company that SoftBank bought for $32 billion. Saudi money flows into Silicon Valley. Okay, so understand what you've got here is Saudi Arabia. Well, SoftBank has a roughly, now it's $100 billion investment fund. It grew, right? It is the largest tech fund in history, right? They concluded $93 billion investment from funders. They include Apple, Qualcomm, and UAE-based Mubadala investment, as well as Saudi Arabia's PID fund. So let's see how much money they put in. They put in half. Saudi Arabia funded approximately half of that $93 billion. The Saudis gave $45 billion, according to the Wall Street Journal. So this $93 billion fund received half of its money from Saudi Arabia because they're poor goat herders who have no money, no influence, and do not influence the tech industry whatsoever. So JP Morgan, BlackRock have been doing business with Saudi Arabia for years. There's a BlackRock in the Kaaba in Mecca, by the way, just so by the way. Right, let's continue. So,
just a correction, Rupert is not a Jew.
Yes, okay, fantastic. Excellent. So, now there's this question from the New York Times magazine. Why is there so much Saudi money in American universities? Saudi Arabia has quietly directed tens of millions of dollars a year to American universities, from MIT to Northern Kentucky. What are the nation's rulers getting out of it? Now, that's a fair question. And of course, they're getting a lot of anti-Jewish propaganda out of it, and stupid people like that woman Ida. Right, so let's have a look. Now, these numbers are slightly old. Some of them are accurate, some of them are up to date, up until as recent as the figures are online. Some of the figures only go up until mid-year last year, so the end of June. I've grabbed what figures I can. Some of these are slightly old, slightly out of date. Some are up to date. Okay, so let's have a look before I jump into, now this is called the College Foreign Gift Reporting from ed.gov, sites.ed.gov/foreign gifts. You can find the same data on other sites. These countries have to report the funding that they give to American universities, except not all of it's reported. The FBI has numerous instances of people not reporting this. So billions of dollars, literally billions, has gone unreported. Okay, so now, so let's follow the money. University Dawa. Okay, so this is China. China has spent, this is between, I think, 2011 and 2017, more or less, $680 million, okay, on US universities in 1,600 donations. Egypt, $6 million. Ethiopia, $1 million. Indonesia, $44 million. Iraq, $44 million. Jordan, $2.5 million. Kazakhstan, $62 million. Kuwait, $66 million. Lebanon, nearly $6 million. Libya, $2 million. Malaysia, $71 million. Oman, 4.7. Pakistan, 5. Palestine, 1 million. Qatar, $1,253,023,324. Then the Saudis come second with $650 million. The UAE has spent $231 million up to that date. And of course, let me go back. Yeah, Israel is up here on its own. They spent $53.74 million on universities. Now, the Israelis have been spending their university funding on things like medicine, medical research, okay, and biotechnology, basically farming. So they invest money into biotechnology and medicine, so better farming and better medical research. What are the Chinese spending it on? Well, it's in political indoctrination through this Confucius Institute to spread the communist goals of the Chinese Communist Party. Now you look at these totals, let's see. Okay, the top 5 spenders are all Islamic countries. They spent $2.26 billion, which is 42 times more money than Israel. And this is like 3 years old numbers, okay, 2-3-year-old numbers. So back then they spent, now if you go here, the updated total of just these two alone, just Kazakhstan and Kuwait alone, Kazakhstan and Kuwait on their own spent 38 times more money than Israel on university lobbying. Why are they not spending this money on lobbying politically, but why are they indoctrinating the minds of American university students? But it goes deeper than that. They also go into K through 12, right through school. So once you add Qatar and Saudi Arabia, these two are nearly $2 billion, which is 35.5 times more than what Israel spent. Now you add these guys together, UAE, Qatar, Kazakhstan, Kuwait, and so on, that's 42 times more. That's $2.26 billion. And once you add China into the mix and you add the modern numbers, okay, including communist China, you're looking at $3.748 billion, nearly $4 billion, which is at this point, now this number's out of date here, but it's more than 70 times what Israel spends in universities. Okay, so Israel is doing biotech spend. These countries are doing Islamic propaganda, and they're spending at least 70 times more than Israel. Any comments from anyone? Or am I shilling
Guys,
because I'm just reading the facts?
Guys, do you have any questions, please? Or comments that you want to
Okay,
make? Please
so
raise
fine.
your hand.
So, okay, so anyway, so let's have a look here, foreign countries. So let's have a look at the countries, okay? So this is the actual spreadsheet. This is the current one. This is not the current one. I couldn't get the current one. There's a problem with the system. It would only give me the first 10. They had some stupid new thing going, which is very weird because I downloaded the same spreadsheet like a couple of weeks ago and it worked fine for a different discussion. So let's have a look. Let's go have a look at, I don't know, let's take China. Let's take China. Let's see what China spends. So this is China, okay? So that's China over there. Let's have a look at the amount of money that China has spent. Now you can't see this very well, but it says here that China has averaged, so the average Chinese donation to universities is $503,000. $503,028.08. They've made 2,462 donations. This is from 2014 to the end of June 2020. So you're looking at 2014 to midway through 2020. The sum total is $1.238 billion. Okay, $1.238 billion. Let's have a look at Saudi Arabia. Okay, equals, let's have a look here. Saudi. Oh, countries, sorry. So let's go back here. Text filters equals, let's have a look at what Saudi Arabia spends. Let's bring that up. Saudi Arabia, average donation $661,000. 1,611 donations in that 6-year period, and the total sum $1.065 billion. Okay, let's have a look at Qatar. So sorry, let's go to country. Let's go to Qatar. So this is what is reported. This is the real numbers are much higher. Okay, you can almost be certain the real numbers are much, much higher. 694 donations, average donation nearly $4 million. Total is $2.7 billion. $2.7 billion. Let's see, what is the Qatari number? 1.253. So when you go back a little bit further, these guys have spent a lot more money than is being reflected. Okay, $2.7 billion. Now, if we had to pick Afghanistan, let's take a handful of these Islamic countries: Azerbaijan, Bahrain, Bangladesh. Let's go to Qatar. Let's go to Saudi Arabia. Okay, let's take those countries. Why not? And let's take the UAE. Let's dump them in here as well. The United Arab Emirates. Now this is called shilling because I'm presenting facts. This is $4.22 billion. Average donation, $1.5 million to these universities. Now notice there are thousands. There's like 30,000+ donations in this list. Okay, the total spend, if we just clear this here, let's just clear the countries. Okay, I'm just going to select all. Okay, I'm going to select all. The total money that these foreign agents, these foreign countries have spent on US universities totals in this 6-year period alone $16.6 billion. $16.6 billion spent on US universities. Saudi Arabian cultural mission, no doubt. What are they getting for their money? You need to ask, what are they getting for their money? So let's go here. Let's go have a look at Israel, since everybody wants to know. Okay, everybody has a big mouth and lots of opinions, but okay, let's have a look at the facts. Let's see what the numbers tell us. Israel, and we've got 124 million, okay, over the same period. 124 million. So if the Saudis plus the Qataris, those are $4 billion. That is 40 to 50 times more money that the Islamic countries are spending on their propaganda in universities. Right. So there you go. And notice Ministry, the Binational Science Foundation, Ministry of Defense, Teva Pharmaceutical Industries, blah blah, National Science Foundation, National Science Foundation, okay, and so on.
Lloyd,
Yep,
uh,
sure.
what about money being spent in donation by private people? Maybe some of them are, rich Jewish people.
That would fall under APAC, and that's private money. So this is money that is voluntarily donated. Understand? Because people like Israel. Let's have a look here. So I'll end this in a few minutes. So I'll do a part 3 of this because I want to make sure that we've covered this thoroughly. Let's have a look here. U.S. taxpayer funding to the Middle Eastern studies. Okay, this is what the U.S. government gives to these universities. These are the top 13 that receive money, to my knowledge. Okay, so universities, Georgetown, they got $484,000 from U.S. taxpayers, and George Washington got $258,000. Yet, funding from Muslim nations, George Washington University got over $100 million. This is from 2011 to 2018. Look here. Georgetown University got $378 million. Israel, for George Washington, spent $507,000 over that 7-year period. George Washington received from Muslim nations alone over $100 million. New York University got $81 million. Sorry?
About Georgetown University and George Washington University?
Because they're a breeding ground of traitors and terrorists who are selling secrets to, and yeah, let's just say they turn out think tanks and people that are very Saudi and Islam friendly when they're done with their education. So yeah, they are one of the hotbeds where they've really had their message sink in deep. And they've managed to. These guys are, look, in total, $16 billion just in the last 6 or 7 years. Understand, what has $16 billion of foreign money into universities bought them? You have to ask yourself. Okay, what have they bought with that money? What did they get? They're not putting it into science, I can tell you that. Okay, it's into politics. They're buying future senators. They're buying future presidents. They are buying future compliance from people who think Islam is just peachy. Understand? Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's alarming to look at those amounts of money, and this is going to be the next generation of people who are going to lead the American government, the bureaucracy, and the world as a whole.
And it gets worse than this. Trust me, they're sticking this money into K through 12. They're putting it into primary school. This money's going everywhere. But I just want to get this out of the way. So let's have a look. Let's look at the university dawah. So the bulk of the money, think about it. The bulk of their money is not going into politics, into lobbying in Washington. The bulk of their money is going into the education system. Think about that. The bulk of the foreign Islamic money is going into the U.S. education system. Think about that for a moment. Your thoughts, Harry?
Yeah, well, it makes so much sense because when I speak to people all over the world, they don't perceive Islam to be problematic at all. So I guess this money is actually having a huge impact on their understanding of Islam, and it's working.
Well, the misunderstanding
I never
of
met,
Islam.
Yeah, I never met a foreigner, a lady who is a foreigner, who had anything bad to say about Islam.
Of course. Because they have no influence whatsoever. Don't forget, these universities are turning out, I don't know, filmmakers, producers, directors, playwrights, authors, politicians, think tank members, journalists. They're turning out people who are going to be analysts, who are completely marinated in the pro-Islamic indoctrination that they've been, received from when these Saudis were pumping their money into the kindergartens. So let's have a look here. Following the money, this is Qatar spending. Okay, so this is the Islamic Lobby University Dawah spend. Right, so this here is over $1.2 billion. Let's look at Saudi, halfway, 600 and something billion dollars. UAE, up here, 200 and something million. 650 million, 200 something million. Then you've got Iraq, Kazakhstan and Kuwait. Kazakhstan and Kuwait spend more money than Israel does. Now remember, Israel is one country. If we start adding the whole list of Islamic countries, yeah, there's not going to be enough space on this chart if you put them together. It's going to run off the right-hand side. So yeah, I'm not sure how, Israel has that much money, but yeah. And so I'll pause here. So what I'll do is I'll finish this article and I'll pause here. This is an article from 2002 called "Moral Hazard: The Life of a Liberal Muslim." It's written in the New Republic, and it talks about this guy. He's a fairly liberal Muslim, and he's very westernized. And this man has been receiving, well, back then in 2002 already, the influence that these Muslims, these Saudis and others hold over the universities, the public institutions like those. This is apparent because this guy had received threats, coercion, bribes. This guy's life was made hell. Okay, he was eventually kidnapped, he was tortured, and for some reason they let him live. He got back home. They released him. They pulled out his fingernails, and he tells about what happened to him. So it's by Franklin Furr. It's November 18, 2002. It's called "Moral Hazard: The Life of a Liberal Muslim." It's in the New Republic, and I'll go to that now, and I'll read a little bit of it. So in his email inbox,
Lloyd,
he
can
found.
you just wait a second because
Sure.
I think we have a question.
Sure.
But guys, please, you're welcome to say anything you want. This is a free speech, but no personal attacks against Lloyd. Just make your case if you want to say anything against what he is showing, and provide the arguments. But no need for any personal attack because I don't want to warn or remove anyone. Thank you. So, Albert, please go ahead.
No, I was just diving in because obviously the term money is being used, but what type? Because in existence, all we have is currency. No one's given a liability for it, you know. So it's all paper and digital and electronic, and
A lot of it is not recorded. A great deal of it is not tracked.
That amount of dough? How do
Say
they
again?
move it just like that, you know?
Okay, well, look, it was in the previous episode, but I discussed, for instance, Iran. When you look at the political lobbying that Iran spent between 2011 and 2018, I think it came to a grand total of $85, okay, on American political lobbying. $85. Now, it's obvious they did not just spend $85. This could not have been the case, right? But what happens is that money is moved somehow into New York, Washington, Seattle, Spokane, Missouri, Kansas, whatever, you pick the place. Well, if that money can enter the US and it goes to someone's personal bank account, it goes to a business, and then that business, through the sheer goodness of their hearts, decides to donate, I don't know, $50 billion to a university to make sure that they buy compliance, that is local money. It is not foreign money because, you see, it went to, the money came from this terror organization in Saudi Arabia or Iran, and it arrived at, let me see, your friendly neighborhood kebab shop. And the kebab shop takes this $3 billion and it now donates it to, I don't know, politicians, universities, and so on. It donates the money to the local police department, donates it to the FBI. It helps a Muslim-friendly mayor run for, the mayorship, or whatever, to become state governor. They fund a few good local elections. You see, it's no longer foreign money because it went to the kebab shop. The kebab shop guy is spending it, so it's American money. This is how they make the money disappear. They route it into the country somehow and they give it to people. So yeah, the money moves across the borders. It moves as cash in different ways. Who knows?
Yeah, but Lloyd, my point was more that it's all currencies across the board. It's backed by nothing. It's got no liquidity.
We're not talking about
value, anything.
We're not here to talk about the Federal Reserve and the fact that fiat money is not backed by anything. This is not the point of the discussion.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Albert.
but it's a lot of currency changing hands. That's all I'm saying.
It's all traceable, but it depends if there's a will to trace it. They want to trace it. That's the other thing. See? And yeah, but there's a lot of money that is buying a lot of Islam-friendly policies.
Yeah, and gifted and this and such. So I hear what you're saying, man. Yeah.
Right. Okay, so he got threatened. In his email inbox, he found ominous messages from obscure sources with warnings such as, "You know what we're capable of." Right? He began suspecting that the threats were more serious than he initially assumed. A van lingered outside of his isolated home but disappeared when he called the police. A few months later, the windows of his family SUV were smashed at a crowded movie theater. He started to get calls. The callers weren't angry white men accusing him of terrorist sympathies. They were fellow Muslim Americans accusing him of selling out the faith because he wasn't, shall we say, he wasn't compliant enough and he wasn't radical enough, right? So Right. So what happens is then he is an author, right? He's a very well known author, he's a well known academic, and he would not comply. And of course, because he wouldn't write certain books for the Saudis, because he wouldn't provide certain propaganda that they wanted him to produce within the academic setting or give their propaganda an academic blessing, because he's a respected academic at top universities in America like Princeton and others, they started to threaten him. In fact, he was suspended from the ceiling by his left arm for 6 hours at a time. Guards shocked him with electricity and pulled out his fingernails. After 3 weeks without a conviction, they released him. Right, so this man suffered torture just so that, to teach him a lesson. He then was supposed to go do a talk within the Middle East. A week before the lecture, a rumor came up. A dissident within the Saudi government told a friend of his that the Saudis planned to pick him up and make him disappear. The Kuwaitis will say, we don't know what happened. Everyone would be interested, then it would be forgotten like everyone else. So there's no better way to gauge the Saudi effort than by reading off the names of prominent Middle Eastern studies departments. So he's now talking about how Saudis have bought off the universities in the Middle East and now they're buying off American universities. So you can gauge the Saudi effort by reading off the names of prominent Middle Eastern studies departments and the gifts, quote unquote, that they have received from Saudi royal family. 5 years ago, King Fahd gave Oxford University more than $30 million to its Islamic Studies Center. In 1994, the University of Arkansas, Bill Clinton's state, received a $20 million grant to begin the King Fahd program for Middle Eastern studies. Thanks to a $5 million gift, UC Berkeley houses the Sultan bin Abdulaziz program in Arab studies. Harvard has a chair, currently occupied by legal scholar Frank Vogel, called the custodian of the two holy mosques, adjunct professor of Islamic legal studies, subsidized by at least $5 million from the Saudis. Ever since Abu al-Fadl's days as a graduate student at Princeton, the Saudis have plied him with offers of similar wealth. In 1991, the Muslim World League offered him $100,000 to write a book on Islam, but it demanded final editorial control. 7 years later, he rejected it. 7 years later, the Saudis offered to nominate him for the $200,000 King Faisal Award. Last year, they offered to send him and guests an all-expenses-paid VIP trip to Mecca. He has seen what Saudi Arabia's patronage has done to the scholarship of his colleagues. He calls Vogel's book on Saudi law, Islamic law and legal system, Studies of Saudi Arabia, an embarrassment. Vogel says he has no qualms about accepting Saudi money. I saw it as something very much in the greater good of the Muslim world and particularly Saudi Arabia. So the money has bought compliance and has bought them cooperation from Western scholars. As an example, you should read this article. It's actually quite frightening once you read it. Any comments from you before I wind down here, Harry?
No, everything is very clear. You provide the evidence. I think it's important.
So this money here, this figure is now nearly $4 billion. It's gone up by $1.2 billion since, right? So we're looking at $3.7 billion here, and this Saudi money is maybe this Israeli money is maybe double, but back 2 years ago, this is the Israeli spend in universities. This is the Islamic country spend. This is 47 times more money. Today it's even more. It's going to be much more, 60, 70 times more. So understand, the Saudis, the Islamic countries, they couldn't change your mind, so they've gone after your children. I'll finish up here. I'm going to wind up here, but hot trend in 2017, the rise of Islamic banks on Main Street, USA. They're not saying the rise of Mormon banks. They're not talking about the rise of, Buddhist banks. They're not talking about, Catholic banks. They're talking about the rise of Islamic banks, a parallel banking system, a competing banking system, which has been given its own dispensation, its own set of laws, its own set of regulations, which intends to replace the US capitalist banking system. So yeah, I guess, you don't see them here with communist banks, but you do see Islamic banks. I wonder why. Final thoughts there before I end up here, Harry.
No, I just want to thank you as usual. Are you going to have a third episode about that? Or
I think we'll need a third episode to finish. Yeah, certainly. Because let me show you what I have here. This is where, so they expect, $3 trillion, okay? Up to that point, right? The value of Sharia money, right? Sharia banking in the US was $3 trillion, okay? $3 trillion. Now, if you look at the value of the top US banks, the top US bank is worth less than $3 trillion. It's $2.5 $2.5 trillion apparently. Okay, so understand that Islamic Sharia banking is worth more than the top US bank, and they expect this to grow by 2020's 4 trillion. No one knows what the real number is, and you'd be surprised to see who's involved in the Sharia banking thing. You don't see them in, I don't know, Jewish banking, Catholic banking, Hindu banking, but you do see Islamic banking that's turning up and trying to compete. So yeah, so these guys are heavily involved in the financial system as well, and the numbers get worse, and then you'll start to see that the numbers are a lie as well. So
Yeah.
final thoughts.
We have a question from
Sure.
Eternal. 1 second.
Sure.
Eternal, go ahead.
I just wanted to know, did you compare it against the big, well, I don't know, you're probably well versed in this, since the beginning of when they, funneled a lot of the money into America, has their influence actually increased, maintained, or degraded? Because that would give you a understanding that their money is causing a visible influence, right? Or are you claiming something else?
They under President Trump, the Saudis alone had to triple their spend because they needed to gain an extra foothold, because Trump was actually putting them on the back foot. So they spent significantly more money. They've actually spent a lot more money since then. And well, if they have $3 trillion already invested, minimum of $3 trillion invested in the US economy, in the financial system, if they pull the plug on this, in Saudi Arabia, for instance, Saudi Arabia, in theory, has $168 billion invested in the US economy. In theory. Recently, there was a spat because of Trump, and they threatened to pull their money out of the US Treasury, which would then crash the US economy. It would cause major problems for the US economy. So, except they didn't claim that they were going to pull $168 billion out of the US economy. They claimed they were going to pull, this was the Saudis alone, were going to pull $750 billion. Now, for a country that only has $168 million invested in the US, where did that sudden $750 billion number come from? So understand, these guys are able to wield massive financial muscle. Now, I know that you were asleep during this whole episode and the prior one, more than likely, so you've missed all of this, but so I'm sure the evidence is lost on you, as it usually is, but these people have massive influence within all spheres of American social life, within all spheres of American business life and politics, as well as education. These guys are everywhere. They are pouring in billions and billions of dollars. What do you think these countries are getting for the $16.8 billion they've stuck into universities? Do you think they're doing it out of the goodness of their hearts?
Most definitely not. By the way, I'm on your side. I just wanted to know.
All right. Yeah, if you were here when I was discussing the connections they have with like Huma Abedin and her connections to the Muslim Brotherhood, her connections to the Saudi government. She was an agent for the Saudi government while she was working for Hillary Clinton, while Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State. I mean, it's just these connections. These people have stuck themselves in everywhere.
Thank you for answering. Appreciate it.
Right. Yeah. So look,
Any
I mean,
other guys?
so for instance, just something that I'll mention, I did mention this last time, but for instance, people talk about the Catholic Church has so much money, they own the whole world, and that the Rothschilds have 590 million trillion gajillion bazillion dollars. Look, there's a finite amount of money in the world, right? The US economy is so big, the world economy is so big. The claims that uneducated people make about the size of the bank accounts of the Rothschilds is larger than the entire money supply in the whole planet. Okay? So if you're going to make the claim that the Rothschilds are richer than the entire planet, I'd love to see the figures, I'd love to see the accounting. Please provide, right? Conspiracy theories aside, and aliens and bullshit you make up aside, just please show us some facts and figures, right?
Oh.
And on top of that, the Catholic Church is worth an estimated $16 billion. That's small change. Mark Zuckerberg is richer than that, okay? Then, of course, I'll mention briefly the royal family of Britain. The royal family has an estimated value, okay, in terms of their value, their wealth, of $86 to $88 billion. Now, that's a fine figure, But the Saudi royal family is worth an estimated 1.4 trillion. So the Saudi royal family is worth 17 times more than the royal family of Britain. Because I know the Queen's a lizard and she runs the world and she's got a million, billion, gazillion, trillion, didillion dollars. Fine. The Queen herself is estimated to be worth about $532 million. Okay? Now, of course, she could just go to the Tower of London, pick up the crown jewels and go sell them at Sotheby's. Right, Harry? If she needed a bit of money, right? Let's say she needed some tea money, she could just go grab the crown jewels and the Cullinan and go sell them at Sotheby's any day she wanted, correct?
It belongs to the
State.
country, no?
It belongs to the state. It does not belong to the Queen. Understand? These are state assets. So people are claiming that, oh no, she actually has 500 trillion, billion, jillion, gazillion, didillion dollars. No, those are state assets. She cannot sell them. She has no right to them. She has her own personal assets. The rest are state assets, which the royal family are, shall we say, they are caretakers of, but they do not own. Those assets, as I said, are state assets. The Saudi king, however, owns the country. He can do what the hell he likes. There's a very big difference within the structure of the Saudi family and the royal family of Britain, whatever the conspiracy theorists and David Icke and other idiots might tell you. So understand, so in theory, they're worth a lot of money. In practice, they're worth a lot less. We can go into the Rothschilds and their finances and that 250-year-old story that really needs to die a slow death at this point, or rather a quick death. Someone should just stand in its throat and choke it. So yeah, but I'll leave it at this. Your final thoughts, Sarah, before I hang it up for the night.
You know, I have like a cognitive dissonance about these kind of things because my mind is deep into these conspiracies. So when I think about the Queen and I think about Rothschild and all those people, I can't help myself but to think that there is so much hidden stories to that. And obviously they have much more than the official numbers. But to be honest with myself, I cannot prove those things. So
no one
unfortunately,
I mean, when people were making claims about the Talmud, so I took out the Talmud, I did the shows on the Talmud, I said, okay, you've been making these claims about these books in the Talmud. First of all, like 20% of the books that they were claiming and the quotes they were making don't exist in the Talmud. They were literally just lying. They were claiming it's in this book called Mickey Mouse Doth Yebemoth, okay, chapter 17, verse 5, sentence number 4. Well, there's no book called Mickey Mouse Yebemoth in the Talmud. It doesn't exist. So they were literally making it up. They were literally just lying through their teeth. Either they were dupes who were deceived, or they just love lying. Then when I went into the actual phrases, then I showed that they were just lying and lying and lying and wrong and wrong and wrong. And then instead of saying they were wrong, they said, no. I meant the secret Talmud, the secret Talmud. It's like, please send me a copy of the secret Talmud that you claim, because previously it was the Talmud. Now I've showed that you're an incompetent liar. Now it's the secret Talmud. Well, now it's the secret money, the invisible money. I did say that earlier. That's the only claim you've got. It's like, at what point, no evidence is good enough, but except the secret evidence, the one they don't have, but they know because they have secret knowledge from the aliens. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Thank you as usual. Thank you very much for the information, for the evidence and the data and your patience. And I guess we will be seeing you next week, unless we have more questions. Guys, anyone wants to ask a question or make a comment or just say thank you? Or to call him a shield again?
Yeah, that would be nice. But anyway, so the royal family. But I've got a quote here. You need to look up. It's on the it's on the companies that are Islamic banks. It's on companies that are Islamic banks. You'd be surprised how companies with names that sound like the Royal Bank of England is an Islamic banking company. It's like, you'd be amazed how they've done this. But yeah, who wants to call me a shill? Anyone?
I don't want to call you a shield. I want to thank you very much for a great presentation. It's been a bit like watching a Formula One race with just a bombardment of statistics and information. It's I've had it up on the computer as well tonight, so I've been able to see more clearly what you've been able to show on the displays. Really fascinating. It ties in with the conversation that took place, I think it was late last night or the night before, about the influence of certain individuals and huge amounts of money that change hands to lobby and buy and garner favour. just one thing I noticed today. I took a very, very quick look at the British and European markets at the close of play. There's been a very, very sharp fall in the markets today. Very sharp. I've put a little screenshot of it up on the group page. But I just wondered, Lloyd, of your view on that, because one of the things that I think we discussed in the chats was, you know, a global financial collapse is coming towards us at a hell of a pace at the minute.
Yeah, obviously, look, inflation is becoming a major issue. Now, the question is, do they cut interest rates? Do they raise interest rates? Can they increase the debt ceiling? Because they've got to do something. If they increase the interest rates, that's going to scare people, and then there's going to be a sell-off, in which case the markets are going to drop. Or do they keep doing what they're doing, which is going to lead them off a cliff? We're looking at hyperinflation, right? So all of the central banks are between a rock and a hard place right now, because when they start tapering, when they start increasing interest rates, of course, that leads to market panic, and eventually they go back to slashing interest rates. Then there's free money, and once companies are getting 0.1% interest rates, they are borrowing billions. They're buying up the property market, and of course they're squeezing the average investor, the average home buyer, out of the market. Property prices go up like crazy. Prices of goods go up like crazy, and of course the companies make bank. So now you've got this massive problem. They're stuck, and at this point there's this massive problem. And of course, we know that the inflation rate is not 7%. The inflation rate, measured according to 1990 statistics, would be 22% today, right? CPI has been changed. They've taken energy costs out of CPI. I mean, like seriously, like, you need to keep the lights on. How can you remove electricity and gas costs from CPI? Right? That's stupid. It's like saying like humans. Well, let's see. They need the following. They need food, they need shoes, and they don't need air. You'll die in seconds without air. So I mean, it's like stupid. So there's a lot of financial funny business, and we all know something's wrong. So yeah, I'd say the market is spooked. I mean, people are worried, and companies know that massive inflation is coming. I mean, we know that my grocery bill has doubled, right? It's not, and we were told it's 3% inflation. Now look, I'm from Africa, but even I know that 100 plus 100 is not 3%. So yeah, those are my thoughts.
Yeah. Albert wants to say another something. Albert?
Yeah, I was just going to say thanks for putting the presentation together. There's a lot going on, more than what we know, eh? Yeah.
Agreed.
It's disgusting.
Yeah, but so look, everyone has a lot to say about Israel, but we need to understand that the Islamic world operates as a lobby. There are 21 countries that operate very uniformly. 21 countries that are part of the military-industrial complex, as you would call them. Cover that in part one. They operate uniformly in a military as well as financial fashion. And politically, they operate through the United Nations, 51 countries, plus Pakistan. They coordinate. So they're not operating alone. And so we need to look at what are they doing. Because everyone wants to blame Israel, which is one country, one tiny little country, but these guys are floating in oil. They have massive amounts of money, clearly have influence. I'm not even done with this, but yeah, we'll wind this down next week. But you will see eventually, I'll show you that these guys are sticking their money in everywhere, especially education, not political lobbying. Yes, they are putting tons of money into political lobbying, but their main interest is corrupting minds in Europe and America, in school and university.
Lloyd, Paul wants to speak again.
Sure.
If that's okay?
Sure.
Paul? Paul, you can go ahead.
Sorry. Hi, Lloyd. Very interesting talk, mate. I've enjoyed listening to it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just curious as to what you think about China doing a similar sort of thing, because I know there's a lot of academies in the UK that have been brought up and are now owned by China, apparently. So it seems quite a common thing that they're doing too.
They're doing the very same thing. They start with these Confucius institutes. The Saudis, the Muslim countries do the same, which are like friendship institutes, social harmony, whatever they want to do. But they really are just political propaganda. And of course, like, what happened like in the US. I mean, you've had there was an article recently about the UK Parliament that said it has a Chinese spy problem. And then of course you've got US senators who've had their chauffeurs have been a spy for China for 30 years. Their 30-year chauffeur turns out to be a Chinese spy. Nothing happens to them, of course. You've had American senators banging Chinese spies. So yeah, this is a serious problem. But of course, so much money is coming their way that people are willing to turn a blind eye. I mean, if and we get screwed. Now, I know people would love to think that I get paid by Harry. When is what's it Mossad going to send those checks? Because man, it's past Christmas already. These guys are way overdue. You know.
Wait,
But-
wait. I'm working here for a year and I didn't get anything. Wait in line.
Oh, good grief. So yeah, Paul, there's definitely these guys are infiltrating. They see us as weak, and they could not defeat us militarily. So now they've moved in through, because we're so tolerant, because we're told to be tolerant, right? We're all woke now. We're all accepting of everyone, including accepting crap that comes from these horrible communist dictatorships and insane Islamic terror organizations and things like that.
Thank you.
Okay, Lloyd. I think we are done for tonight. I would like to
think
thank
we
you
should-
again.
Sorry,
What?
one side note. When I was referring to the budget that Israel get off the US, I wasn't comparing like as the conversation's gone. Obviously, I see Israel as more of like an arm of the USA. So do they need to influence it the other way around? You know what I mean? If that makes sense.
The US
Well, that's just my
has,
opinion.
the US likes Israel. 67-70% of the US population likes Israel. The majority, only about 12% of the US public likes Islamic countries. Understand? So you're looking at 70% popular support for Israel, 12% support for Palestine and Islamic causes. So you're looking at a roughly 88% of the US population does not like Islam, does not like Islamic countries. Whereas overwhelmingly, and because of this overwhelming support for Israel, the US government has to comply, because these people won't get voted in if they show that they have tendencies against their population.
Thank you.
Okay, Lloyd. We are done.
Cool,
Thank you
man.
very much and see you next week.
Yeah, I will stop sharing, and yeah, good night, guys. Thank you very much for your time, for listening, and
Please send me the link to the YouTube channel once you posted this episode.
I will do. All right.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, if anyone wants the links to some of the articles, I mean, you'll be able to find them, obviously, but if you need the links specifically, let me know, and I can collect the links from my PowerPoint, and I can give those to you. All right. Thanks, guys.
Okay.
Good night.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Good night.
Welcome.
Cheers, Lloyd. Good night.
Right.